Okay.
Okay, I see it's 5:31, so I would like to call to order the electronic city council workshop for the city of College Place for Tuesday, April 7th, 2020. City clerk, will you please take roll call?
Councilmember Bobbitt,
Here.
for Cleveland,
Present.
Councilmember Peterson,
Here.
Councilmember Nyhagen was going to attend by phone. I don't have her on yet, so I will watch for her. Councilmember Selby,
Present.
Councilmember Sherman,
Here.
Councilmember Trope,
Yes.
and as is here, we also staff, we have Administrator Rizzatello,
Here.
City Attorney Colwell,
Here.
Finance Director. Looking for your spot on my
Carlton, I'm here.
and Fire Chief Winter. I
Here.
knew the name, I just couldn't find you on my list.
Okay, great. So we have well, we don't really need a quorum, but everybody's present.
Have a quorum though. Yes.
Okay, so will we please take a moment for Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and
to
to the republic for which it
for which it
stands,
stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty.
and justice for all.
Thank you. And Mr. Bobbitt, Councilmember Bobbitt's going to share a few words to take us into our workshop.
Okay, shall we bow our heads? Our Father in heaven, we bow before you now with circumstances, Lord, that we're working through. We ask that you will bless this electronic meeting, that you will help us all to be able to listen to and hear the materials that are going to be presented tonight. We pray this in Jesus' name, amen.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Councilmember Bobbitt. Okay, so moving along into workshop items, we have 4 items on the agenda. So first item is the financial policies by Mr. Carlton.
Yes, so this is what was provided in your documents for the entire policies, including the versions that were previously approved for A through K. We do have a few modifications on a couple of the line items within the first sections. I attached a document that you all can see here, I believe, showing what items have been changed in the previous approved items. We added a section on C22 under the general budget policies, basically stating that any change in personnel or programs would be reported to council and aid in their approval of the budget. We also added a section C30, which shows that we will follow the established deadlines by the state for non-charter code cities. Number 3, we added the funds that were previously added from the prior approvals, the current expense reserve fund, the hotel motel tax fund, and this year we added the CDBG project fund. They required us to track that project and that grant monies through a separate fund. Under number 4, under the revenue policy, I just added an item in under the fees for service showing that it was approved by city ordinance, which I thought was important to include that. Number 5, that was under the purchasing and payment of claims area. In my review of it, I noticed that when the documents or checks were approved, it stated that there would be dual signature. Since that time, we do a lot of ACH and EFT transactions, and we put some verbiage in there showing that identifying that as a new item and that approval authorization by the finance director and subsequent approval by city council. Number 6, in 2018, there was a sole source acquisition agenda item approved by council, and I put that into the policy as well. Now sections 11 through, or L through T, those are all added in the final phase, and we can go through each one of those. Does anybody have any questions so far? No, I don't think we want to go through each line item in detail. I did mark some highlights that I'll go over. We can bring up the draft. And if we can go down to the L section, page 35. This is the start of the new items being added and up for discussion. So this is the capital improvement program policy, the CIP, and this directly relates to the 6-year CIP plan that Mike creates and that we implement. And this is just showing, getting into detail on the infrastructure, and the policy provides direction for the development and implementation of the annual CIP, which you all are aware is a 6-year plan. Of course, this will be updated annually under L3. And then the first year, the CFP plan will constitute the capital budget for the ensuing budget year. Then there's some additional items that are put in on some longer range items. TIP, Transportation Improvement Plan, relates to the CFP. LID programs, which, if you're not aware, are local improvement and district programs in which you can finance projects based on a certain area within the city. So it could be identified as a project that benefits one community, so there can be a program put in place for that. Then it goes into different financing methods, operating cost items, construction standards, and then it talks about the estimated useful lives of projects. That's important when it relates to the financing of the project, that the financing can exceed the life of the project. So we identified those items within this policy. Just a quick question, did everybody have a chance to kind of overview the policy so I don't have to go through each line item in detail?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. You could go to the next page, 37. We get into debt management. Sorry, question?
One quick question from Lauren here. I think you already addressed a couple of them previously here. There were a couple of audit findings. Were those have been incorporated into this policy, or is that the correct avenue, or is that a non-issue?
I think indirectly they're included in the policies. Some of them don't necessarily relate to policy, just a matter of how we're doing things. Definitely the sole source item was one that was in the audit brought up again, so that's in there. I don't have the list of audit findings in front of me, so I can't remember exactly what's in there. It's a good point. I will go through and cross-reference those audit findings to see if it's necessary that we have a policy in place if it's warranted. So I'll do that before this comes to council.
Sure, thank you.
Quick question from Councilmember Selby.
Yes.
What would be helpful for me, I looked through these, but it would be helpful for me if you could highlight anything that's a change from our current practice. Because like section L, to me, looks like exactly what we've been doing. So anything that's, it's not just that we're writing it down, it's that we are actually doing something different. Does that make sense?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
And, you know, to be honest, a lot of these ones that are in these sections are things we have been currently doing. It's just now they're in written form and in an official policy that will be approved by council. So the next section is debt management. The amount of debt issued by the city is an important factor in measuring its financial performance and condition. Proper use and management of borrowing can yield significant advantages. And it lists those advantages there. Couple areas that I pointed out in the next section under 1, the city council is required approval is required prior to the issuance of debt. The term of the debt shall never exceed beyond the useful life of the improvements to be financed. And I think an important one of the city will not use long-term debt to pay for current operations. And I think that was an accepted practice, but this actually puts it, you know, formally in writing. And that the long-term borrowing will only be used for capital improvements that cannot be financed from current revenues. Now we get down into number 11. I think it's an important part there is the amount of debt that we currently can have cannot exceed the aggregate total of 7.5% of the assessed valuation of taxable property within the city. I did that calculation and currently there's about 730, this was provided me by the county. We currently have an assessed value of $734 million, which at 7.5% is approximately 55 million in debt. Our current outstanding principal is just over 18 million with a total value of that debt that was issued at 31 million. So we're currently well within our 7.5%. The next in the capital planning, it's important to note that the city shall integrate its debt issuance with its capital improvement program, which is how we're currently operating. And go to the next page 39 at the top, the issuance of debt to fund operating deficits is not permitted. At the top of 39. It's that first sentence at the top. And then just some, you know, legal governing principles that are provided by the state and federal rules and regulations that will follow as it relates to the incurrence of debt. Some roles and responsibilities. The city council shall approve indebtedness, approve appointment of bond underwriter and bond counsel, approve the financial policy, including the section on debt, approve budget sufficient to provide for timely payment of principal and interest on all debt. And then it gets into a list of items that finance director in consultation with city staff members such as city administrator, finance committee, the mayor, and council shall address all these items relating to the debt. If you have any questions about any of those points.
This is Mayor Norma Hernandez. I have a question.
Yes.
Are any of these items in here different from usual or best practices that we should be aware of?
No, I think a lot of these policies were drafted up between Mike and Sarah, and we've just incorporated those into the program, and then I've gone through and verified the information. So I think from the most part, it's the best practices within the cities of similar size. And also working with the SAO office.
Yeah, I can add some to this. A lot of these policies, especially this last phase, we were working on over the last like roughly year and a half or so. So a lot of these come from the best practice financial policies that are on the MRSC website. And then one more point of clarification to an earlier comment is a lot of things in here from the audit are to address recommendations. There were no official findings in that audit. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. That was a misstatement by me. I apologize for that.
Yeah, no problem.
If you move on to page 40, it gets into the type of debt, instruments, and this is straight off of government websites that we're allowed to follow. So it's sort of boilerplate information about the types of debt we can incur. If you have any questions on those.
So debt here is defined as not revenue bonds. Yes. Yes.
Well, it can be
There-
any kind of debt we incur to
any
anything.
any debt. Okay.
Yeah. Purchasing equipment, long-term projects, basically deals with any kind of debt incurrence.
And here comes a question that I'm not sure I think I asked this too many times. The the debt that we have for the redoing College Avenue, that has a date out there that's quite a ways out. Do we know what percentage that is of the total? If you could guess, and if not, that's fine.
The principal or the original amount of the
Outstanding, the principal.
yeah, I have that.
Yeah.
Just give me a second.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Sorry, my home office isn't very organized.
Mm.
I don't have the principal amount, but I believe there's there's about $3.8 million still outstanding on that loan.
Hmm.
I believe that's the right loan.
That's fine. We can, yeah.
And with that loan as well, they have the dedicated individual, essentially property tax allocation to it since it was voted on by the public.
Okay. No, that's good to know. That's, yeah, as far as the percentage of total, it's, yeah. Thank you.
I think of the total, it's about about 20% of the total debt.
Okay.
Current outstanding debt.
Thank you.
Councilmember Trope, I had a quick question on this. We've talked
Yes.
previously about kind of what our leverage looks like. If you had a chance to look at, some indicator we could use, maybe tax revenues versus outstanding debt or something like that.
I have not had a chance to look at the leverage position, but I definitely have that as a task.
Thank you.
So those type of debts that are listed, of course, there's the unlimited tax, general obligation bond. That's a voted a voted on tax. There's a limited tax obligation bonds, which are non-voted. We have revenue bonds. The revenue bonds are associated with the certain utility that's issuing the bond. There's the local improvement district bonds, which I touched on briefly before. Then we have, it identifies short-term debt, leases, public works trust fund loans, which I'm personally not familiar with, but that's just one of the categories in which we can incur debt if we need to. There's a statement. You can move to page 41. Statement about the communication policy. You know, that is, we're very transparent as, you know, as possible, and that everybody knows what's going on. And then a compliance policy. The next section gets into our fixed assets. That means, you know, land, property, buildings, equipment, basically covers a whole gamut of items. Talks about that we'll have the city to list and inventory assets to ensure accountability and stewardship of city assets. It identifies certain capitalization levels, anything above $5,000 and a useful life of more than 1 year is to be accounted for. And then, of course, the good talked about disposals. There's also sensitive items that are less than 5,000, but over 1,000 that should be capitalized, and that an inventory of items will be maintained and updated once every 2 years. That's a project. I cannot provide you right now a list of all the fixed assets as were stated, so this is definitely a project to work on for 2020 to get a comprehensive list of our assets. The next section O is on accounting and financial reporting. The main parts of that, basically that we are following GAAP, although because we are a cash basis city based on state statute, we are not in compliance with GAAP, but that's an acceptable departure. But most of the other accounting besides that departure is done according to GAAP. It also states that we follow the BARS accounting, which is required by the state. And then we also just identifying we have a comprehensive accounting system to maintain and track all that information. And we have full disclosure provided in all financial reports and bond representations, and an audit. The annual final report due 150 days after the end of the year, as prescribed by the state auditor's office. And that on the next page that we have our yearly audit. Now, some other areas of not significant length, but just identifying them within the policy is a policy on bank return checks. Just basically establishing how the department will handle those. The same along the lines with the delinquent and uncollectible accounts receivable, giving some time frame and some policies for us to follow and how we deal with, you know, customers in that category.
Quick question. This is Councilmember Selby with a quick question.
Yes.
On the NSF checks, do we charge a specific fee other than what we normally would do with a delinquent? I know that oftentimes our bank will charge us a fee, and so most merchants will charge, you know, a fee for that.
That is a very good question, and I missed that in my review of it, so that's definitely something we can look at adding. Yes, historically, in my position, any NSF fee charged by the bank is passed on to the customer.
Carlton,
But since I've been here, we have not had an NSF check, so knock on wood.
Mr. Carlton,
Yes,
we do have an NSF fee. It's established in our resolution for our fees resolution each year.
oh, there is? Okay.
Yes.
Then what I'll do is in this policy, I'll make a reference to the fee schedule. Thank you. And then the next section on delinquent and uncollectible accounts receivable, just set some policies for us in the finance department to follow and give us some guidelines about days in which to enact the policy. A short section on city utility rates. I think the important part is the staff shall conduct an annual comprehensive rate review each fall that coincides with what goes into the budget. And just stating when they're implemented. The next section dealing with long-term financial planning. A short section on that, just identifying that one thing that we're currently not doing in alliance with the CIP is also doing a financial forecast for that same time frame. And Mike and I talked about that, and that's something we're going to implement this year with the 2021 budget.
Brian, I have a question.
Yes.
This is Councilmember Sherman. On the city utility rates, back on section R, sorry, I couldn't get
Yes.
unmuted in time. This says the staff shall conduct an annual comprehensive rate review. And I thought that we were doing a more comprehensive review or like a bigger, deeper review every 3 years is what we started a couple years ago. And then I thought it was just kind of an update every year. So is this saying that you're going to do a massive review, or maybe Mike can speak to that?
I mean, the idea here is that we're going to do it like a deeper just review every year, because as we know with the capital projects, even though we do have the 6-year plan with grant funds, everything else, it's a very fluid situation. Luckily, we do have the FCS modeling spreadsheets that we received essentially when we had them do the water, wastewater, and stormwater studies. So literally it's going in and then seeing essentially the project costs, the grants, everything else, and then what we have to increase it by. So we have the tool in order to do that. So it is just part of the annual budget process.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's still the 3-year rate studies for each of the utilities that is, I think that's what you're meaning when you're talking about those comprehensive rate studies. I think this is just a comprehensive review of those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Get the rates right for the budget.
All right.
Councilmember Peterson here. I was wondering, is there a section on here or clarification on unclaimed property? Is this the right place where that would be listed?
That's a good point, and that's currently not in there.
From my experience in the past, it's always not with the city, but in personal experience, that's always nice to, if we can, to outline what the process is for identifying those and the process for either giving those back to the owner or onto the state. Yeah. So anyway, just a thought.
Okay, I marked that down as an item for follow-up. Mike and I can talk about that.
Yeah.
We were on to ask the long-term financial planning section. And as I stated, doing a cash forecast in alignment with the 6-year capital facility plan. Section T goes into long-term revenue policies, just basically how we're going to deal with looking at, and this also relates to the 6-year forecasting model as to how we're going to deal with long-range revenue and how we deal with those. So it's sort of putting some, giving us some direction in when we're dealing with those numbers that go in. Property taxes, utility excise tax rates, setting fees and changes for building permits as stated here. Charges for parks and rec programs. It does give a fee model. I mean, a lot of those are targeted, and I know we work with the planning department to go through those fees every year. We'll just have to work towards using this model and helping them determine what the fees they're charging. So it sets some parameters for us to follow to come up with our numbers for our fee schedule. And then it comes down to the fee review that will be reviewed by the city council, via the finance committee, and last section dealing with grants under T9. The last section is an appendix and it gives you glossary of the terms. So that's what we've come up with so far. Any questions?
Hi, Councilmember Peterson. I think this is fantastic. I know a lot of times financial structures, you find out that it's a hanging folder somewhere that's got notes that have been put in it over the decades.
Right.
So thank you so much. This is really nice to put this in writing and organize it like this.
Yeah.
I just say we need to pause a minute because Lisa's computer, which was running this, crashed for a moment. So we're fixing that. So
I was wondering if it was just me that it looked different all of a sudden.
yeah.
Yeah, we lost the last couple sections. But just in comment, this really gives everybody from the city, for city council, definitely shows you the direction that the finance department is taking and the policies that we are required to follow to give you some assurance. You know, we're safeguarding all the assets.
I appreciated the detail in it.
That's a lot of detail.
Yeah, but it answers, you know, if there's any questions,
Yeah.
you can find the solution in there. So, or the answer to it. So I appreciate that. Interesting read, Chief Wimpier.
Fire trader. Nice.
I missed that. What was that?
Chief Winter.
Fire trader.
Anything good?
A bunch of used fire trucks.
Are you sure that's not just the cover page stapled onto the front of another magazine?
Well, after hearing that, you know, we have so much debt capacity that we haven't spent, I'm getting ideas.
Might want to rethink that given
Current situation.
current events in the world.
I can spend it as fast as you can print it.
Unfortunately, I think the government's printing so much money right now, we probably don't want to even go down that path.
Don't forget, there's a correlation between debt and cash flow. So
Also, don't forget that tax revenues fuel all of this, and they're bound to be down. I mean, you just look at, I guess the latest I've seen on gasoline consumption's down 50% nationwide.
Wow.
So just think about gas revenues. Think, the good thing for us, we have Home Depot and Walmart that are probably doing pretty well. I don't know if you guys have been to Home Depot. Stunning. There are more people now than ever I've seen at Home Depot. And Walmart's crazy. So
everybody's at home, wants to do projects.
yeah, I did a little planning today myself. So Chief, unfortunately, that means I don't think you can just go buy some excess equipment out there.
But it's good to dream.
I can at least window shop.
Yeah.
My wife says the same thing. I don't agree with her either, Heather. In a crisis, I tend to go into the don't spend mode. She goes into the other mode.
Well, it's hard to get the economy back if you don't spend money.
Yeah, there's truth in that to a limited degree, but I don't think we're going to count on you to do it for us.
I just want to do my part.
Go team.
Go to Walmart.
Too many people.
Go to Happy Wander and get dinner.
There we go.
Maybe after all the social distancing is done, we should order catering for our meetings, College Place restaurants, on a cycle.
Not a bad idea. I'll chip into that.
Each of us have a different restaurant.
So, City Attorney, are you really in New York?
No, that's her background.
Yeah.
Oh, you're
You
muted, Bree.
You win the prize.
I think it's Hong Kong.
Oh, excuse me.
Oh, my favorite city.
No, that's New York. I used to work right next door to that building right over your left shoulder.
Is it?
Yeah.
I love Hong Kong.
You'll have to explain how you did that sometime.
I did. It's super.
You showed
It's
us
a
last time.
Oh, it's,
Oh,
oh.
Wow.
Flex on
Lauren, you
Amazon.
need some help figuring it.
Well,
that looks
see,
really good.
Well, I
now-
will tell you guys, I applied for the PPP loan and the emergency small
Good.
business loan.
Good, good.
I had to lay off my assistant, and I would like to get her back on the payroll.
Oh no.
Mm.
It's going to be a tough
Well, I
time.
mean, I have cushion, but I'm thinking this is going to last a long time.
Mhm.
The implications.
Yeah.
The big deal is testing, I think, before you can get people back to work.
And that small business. loan-
Ree, there's no court proceedings going on now, is there?
No, court is shut down. Yeah, it's really have a few things in the queue for some clients, but there's just nothing we can do.
Hmm.
No,
They're
pe-
doing emergency orders, protection orders, and things like that, but that's it.
Ree,
But we're gonna make it.
did you apply for that one that just came out today? Is that the one you were saying this?
SBA loan.
Yeah, there's a payroll loan, so you can keep your employees on payroll and keep those payroll taxes going in. So I applied for that one, and then there's a small business emergency disaster something up to 10,000.
That's the grant. Okay, good,
Yeah, the grant, right?
good.
So hopefully I'll be spending some money.
See if Cynthia has an idea.
Can you see David, Ree?
No. Well, let's have him talk.
Oh, no, he's showing you what you can spend your money on.
Oh, sweet.
He'd like a new fire truck.
I would love to buy him a new fire truck. My dad has an old one he restored. I don't know what year it is, but
These ones are used. They're a bargain.
yeah.
Cheap at twice the price.
Well, maybe not twice the price. Maybe the repair bill.
I don't have a car payment right now, so
Oh, so you got an extra $500,000 sitting around for a fire truck.
So Chief, what I hear is Ree has volunteered to buy your frivolous.
Deal. We'll even let you drive it.
have you seen the increase in calls since the last meeting? No, good. Good, good,
I'm
good.
surprised.
We went and helped with a structure fire this morning in Walla Walla. We were there 3 minutes.
Oh,
They got it out before we got there, so that's good.
that is good. I know
Lauren,
where
have
my
you guys-
fire extinguishers are.
Lauren, are you guys seeing more traffic at the hospital, or is it pretty low?
Hospitals are in a tough situation nationwide in that we, of course, as you probably read in the paper, stop the elective activities. And that's, that's commercial, insurance is a lot and others, but to try to keep our PPE supplies in stock for, so you've seen a lot of, we're hearing stories of some hospitals in the Northwest actually laying staff off right now.
Right.
Volumes are actually very low, anticipating, something. And if it'll be interesting in the future to see how we can have the PPE available without stockpiles, either mass production quickly or something. But this
That's
has
going to
been
have to be sponsored outside. That can't be on the hospital.
it's been extremely rough for hospitals, to have volumes go down by 20-30%, anticipating
daughter's,
something that may or may not happen. Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt real quick. I just want to remind you guys that we're still live on YouTube.
Okay, we can keep going.
Okay. All right. Carlton, were you finished with your report?
Yes. Last thing I'd said, if there's any additional questions.
Okay, did anybody have any additional questions for him? Okay, all right, thank you very much. Moving on to the Lions Park renovation financing strategy by Mr. Rizzatello.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. As you all know, this is a project that we've been working on for the last couple of years. And we have a plan for it that's attached as far as having the nature play equipment, the walking path around the perimeter, fixing the fishing pond, and so on and so forth. Really what's going to help us get this project going is there's 3 grant opportunities from the State Recreation Conservation Office with the deadlines that are coming due. So I just want to give you a heads up on this because you're all going to see resolutions of support. The first one will be this upcoming meeting on the 14th, and then there'll be 2 others at the 28th. And I just want to briefly go over what each resolution of support is about, so that way you know about it ahead of time. The first one is the Washington Wildlife Recreation Grant Program. That one has about 50% match. We can get about $500,000 off of it. And that'll go to get replacement restrooms, splash pad, nature play equipment, picnic shelter, and climbing wall. Land Water Conservation Fund grant, that's due June 1st. And all the due dates on this just got pushed back because these were actually due May 1st. That one is a 50% match, and they'll deal with the Lions Park pond separation, the fishing dock, the perimeter path. And then the Youth Athletic Facility Grant, that's another $500,000 we can go after, and that'll deal with renovating the softball and the baseball field. What we've done differently from this go around is that the last time they're very big about having a skin in the game as far as match. As well as additional other supports, and because the time frame was so constricted the last time, while we made a good case, we didn't have a lot of that. We've started earlier with the letters of support. So as of right now, we're up to around 40 letters right now from organizations across the valley. So we're definitely sitting a lot better there. And then plus over the last couple of years, we've been saving all of our REAP 2 funds towards this. So we have over 400,000 towards this. And the idea here is that we're putting in for the 3 grants this summer. There'll be some sort of presentation. I don't know how it's going to go, because typically you go to Olympia present this, but because of the whole social distancing thing, it may be something like this, who knows. And the idea is that we will tee this project, so hopefully we'll have the funds to do this going into summer 2021. And given the depth of this project, it would not shock me if some of this goes into 2022. But yeah, really, we're just trying to get grants from all over the place to make sure that this project happens. One thing I will note, which is a bit of a moving target, is what does this thing truly cost? Because the park itself was pegged around 1.5 million, and that was programmed with basically a cost increase estimated from the last time at around 22%, but that was because of how high the construction market was and how busy the contractors were and how the bids were coming in on other projects. That may go the other way given the fallout from the coronavirus crisis. We just don't know right now. Likewise, same thing with the pond, ranging from 500 to 700,000 a fully separated. Again, it's a moving target because our early estimates on this project were taking into account the construction market at the time. And as we all know, things have changed quite significantly on this. So just giving you a heads up about the various resolutions of support that you'll see in the coming weeks. That way you know what they directly tie to.
Mike, a quick question on this, Councilmember Trope. As I understand it, this year we're earmarking 200,000 for this project, another 200,000 next year on a total cost of estimated, let's say 2 million.
Yeah.
Are all the grants matching?
The grants, they actually match against each other. That's the neat part about it. So if you get the one grant, you can basically use the other grant as you can match them against each other because it's all different funding sources, even though it's through the same state grant agency. So you can leverage them against each other.
So the 400,000 still looks like adequate to cover the project.
Yeah.
From
Yeah.
self-funded. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions for Mr. Rizzatello? All right, hearing none. Thank you. Let's move on to the third item, emergency powers to allow enforcement. And that's going to be by Mr. Rizzatello and Ms. Colwell.
Yep. So this item came to our attention because City of Walla Walla was passing an ordinance to revise their emergency powers ordinance. And what we realized is that in our emergency powers ordinance, while we had conditions on which to declare and enforce local emergencies, we didn't really have enabling language to enforce gubernatorial and state boards of health proclamations. We still could, but the problem is without having this language in there, it basically enforcement would go directly to like the county courts instead of the city prosecutor, and that would make, I would say, enforcement a little bit unique, to say the least. So working with RE, we decided this was the best route to go to make sure that we had the language we needed in this. So you'll see this in the edit document. If you go to page 4, the red type, is the additional language in this code. But it's very consistent with a lot of other revisions you're seeing in a lot of other comparable cities. Just because a lot of the emergency preparation in a lot of cities really didn't ponder something exactly like a pandemic. So this is like a new frontier.
So would we look at this at the meeting next week for approval?
Yeah.
Any other questions?
If we need to do enforcement and the gubernatorial and state board of health proclamations, this is just another tool in the toolbox. Luckily, in talking to Chief Tamaris, a lot of folks understand the gravity of the situation, and we've had a couple of minor incidences, but nothing really bad. So.
Well, with the schools being out now for the rest of the year and the weather turning nice, it'd be nice to be able to enforce some of this, because I suspect that's going to become an issue.
Yeah, I agree. The minor issue we did have had to do with the basketball courts, which is why we had to take the hoops down on that. But I would, yeah, given my background coming from Chicago, I would say that when it gets warmer in the summer months, it gets interesting. So that's why I would like to get ahead of it.
Absolutely. Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, we're going to move on to the last item on the agenda. It's the draft resolution. Chief Winter and Mr. Rizzatello.
So Mike asked me to present this tonight. He thinks I don't work enough, so he keeps giving me new projects. So Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was a year ago we first wrote the first COOP?
2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
So in that COOP, which I helped write that as well, I thought was really an excellent document, and Mike now has me writing a new one. So what we learned was that in order to qualify for the Stafford Act, which is the act that allows emergency funds to go to communities and local government, the COOP needed to be adopted by resolution by the city. When we realized that, we said, well, let's revamp the one we have. The first one we did was really focused about what happens if we were to lose a building or facility in times of disaster. Where would staff go to work? Where would work be done at? And outlined kind of a hierarchy of where those essential functions would take place, and identified some of those essential functions that still needed to continue no matter what type of disaster occurred. Since then, as you know, we're in a different type of a disaster, which is not necessarily a facility or a building type limiting thing, but more of a personnel limiting disaster. And that's why there's two documents that are presented, and I'm hoping you have had a chance to look at those. They are confidential documents that, according to Lisa and Mike, are not subject to public disclosure because they talk about how we operate in times of a disaster. So that second document really talks about if we have staffing shortages due to people having to stay home because of the pandemic, or because they're sick, or because worse things have happened, how does the community still operate? How does the city still function? And lines out more directly what that path of, you know, if the mayor isn't available, who's next in line? If that person isn't available, who's next in line? And really drills more into the weeds of that succession planning for a short-term basis and lays that out. It also shows in the annex to the continuing of operations plan, the one specifically talking about the pandemic, that we really need to be aware that in pandemics in the past, they have a life cycle where they're not going to just hit us once, but they're going to come back again, possibly in the fall. And we need to be prepared for that second wave. In talking with the health department and health districts, that wave may happen to us 3 or 4 times this time, just because no one has had this disease before. And so we need to make some of those preparations as a city so that we're aware that even though we're telecommuting today, we may have to do that again in the fall with some of our staff. Some of the document that has not made it to you yet, because I think I'm at 115 pages of more annexes or appendices, is going to be sections of the COOP, or the continuing of government plan, for each department, where each of the departments are going to have to figure out in great detail, if the chief isn't available because they're out of town and a disaster occurs, or is sick, or can't make it to work, who's next for the police department, who's next for the finance department, so on and so forth. Some of the bugs we've worked out that I think we've caught, first, Mike thought that I should be second in charge if he's not available. I thought that was a terrible idea. I can't sign anything, therefore it should not be me. And I don't want to sign anything, therefore it should not be me. And so we've, put the finance director as next in line. Surprise, Brian. Hope you enjoy that. But looking at those types of things, because usually in a time of disaster, the fire and police organizations are really dealing with the disaster themselves, especially if it's quite, harmful to the entire community. And that really isn't a role where we should be running the city. We should be running the incident and dealing with the emergency itself, not worried about where that cash flow is happening and all those types of things, because I'd have a fleet of trucks, obviously. So we don't want me to have any of that power. And I understand that, a little disappointed, but I understand that. So these are in draft phase. We need to, they're fairly close to being done, so they'll probably come back to you on the 14th unless there's an issue or something that you would like me to address, and I can't make it to the 14th, but I'm pretty sure we can have it ready for you again in a week. I'm happy to entertain any questions, or Mike, maybe you have some comments.
Yeah, I just say David did a great job on this. Our first continuity of operations plan was great, but it needed to be a little bit easier to follow. And then also, we didn't deal with the subject matter of pandemics, just because when you look at the boilerplate on a lot of the continuity of operations plan, it really dealt more with like natural disaster type stuff. So like wildfire, floods, things of that nature, not really public health nexus items. So given the situation at hand, that was why we really needed to add some language in pertaining to that. And then also how a lot of cities typically have dealt with COOPs in the past is that they were put together by department heads and administration, and then essentially it was kept for operations. However, in the latest iteration dealing with FEMA and a lot of the federal agencies, it came to the attention of the Tri-Cities that this actually had to be adopted by resolution of council to qualify for those pass-through federal dollars as they arise. So this is more of a condition where I would say the process of dealing with the fallout of a disaster financially has changed a little bit in the past, where you didn't really need this adopted by a formal resolution, but now you do. I will again mention though, because it does have sensitive information in it, this record's basically private, confidential, because it does deal with operating the city in adverse circumstances. So,
Mike, Councilmember Peterson here. Related to this, one of the interesting dynamics of this has been the individuals wanting to stockpile drinking water in their houses. I understand we've got, at an essential level, we've got the sewer system under contract, we have drinking water wells, do we address in this with contract services how the succession of how we would assist or intervene in such a way if the need be, if they were to lose staff for these two essential services that I just outlined, their drinking water and sewer services?
There is language in there detailing essentially working interlocally with surrounding governments, and then also working on the state level and the federal level. And there is a reference in this actually to the utility code, because like for instance, when the water system, there is actually a multi-tiered approach to when you have like emergencies in operations in the water system utility.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
Councilmember Selby here with a couple of quick questions, and I admit I did not make it through the entire document. So do we have, I saw the Go Kits, which I thought was a great idea, but one of the things that seems to be an issue like all the time is who has the keys. And so I'm like, do we have like critical things like keys and stuff? Do we have like backups somewhere? I mean, I don't need to know where, but just,
Sure.
you know, so that you can,
that was a project that John, when he ascended to the community development director role, assisted me with. So we do have the key situation taken care of. Yeah, early on it was a little tenuous, but that is taken care of.
great, thank you.
And the fire department has a spare key to every commercial and education building in town, including City Hall and all of those. They're
Great.
locked up, you know, we don't just have them on our trucks, but.
Good. My second question is trivial, but I'm curious. Why are they called annexes instead of like appendix or sub-plan or whatever?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't really know. If you look at a lot of the groups from a lot of cities that are adopted in this way, that seems to be a formality coming out of FEMA. At least that's what I've seemed to have indicated from my research.
Thanks, I was just curious.
Yeah.
I do see that Councilmember Nyhagen is on the line with us. Did you have anything that you wanted to ask Councilmember Nyhagen?
No, I was having a terrible time with my telephone, and I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm hearing it okay, but it's going in and out.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you so much.
So were there any other questions or comments for either Chief Winter or Mr. Rizzatello?
None.
No.
Okay, then that's the end of our agenda. Is there any other business? All right, hearing none, then the City Council workshop is adjourned. Thank you all.
See y'all later. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Be safe, everybody.
Yeah.
Buddy.